or Iglesia ni Cristo.
Don't underestimate
the power
of a single
conversation.
It could change your whole life.
INCRadio Chatline.
conversations that matter.
Good afternoon and good evening to everyone who's tuning into another episode, another broadcast of INCRadio Chatline, where we like to have conversations that matter. I am your host for today, Tony Rose Valenzuela, broadcasting from Sterling Heights, Michigan. And we're so excited for today's topic because today we'll be talking about to be understood. To be understood. I don't know where this conversation could go because Team Live Chat is always super, super awesome. Being able to see all of their insights, but it's not just Team Live Chat that I'll be talking to because I also have one of my great friends here with me here in the hangout who's over to my east, no, my west. He's over to my west of the hand.
Actually, honestly, I'm not good enough in geography to be able to tell. I just know it's somewhere in Illinois. So, hello everyone. Hello, good morning, good evening, good afternoon. I'm Brother Awesome John Villacruz live here from the local congregation of Rockford here in the state of Illinois, in the district of Great Lakes. And I think I'm in the west of
Yeah, you're west of me. It
west
took
of
me
Michigan.
it took me a second because I always forget, like sometimes we're just traveling. It is the I guess not quite traveling season yet, but it's warming up kind of
Mm.
depending where you are in the world. A little bit sometimes.
What's the temperature there in Michigan?
I'm saying it's warming up, but it's not warming up here. It's like in the 30s. So that's probably around like 1 to 2 degrees Celsius for our friends in Celsius. So stay wrapped up if you're in the Midwest region because our weather is totally unpredictable. You want to make sure that you're always staying safe. So have that extra jacket, have the umbrella if you're coming to visit us. But I think in other places it's kind of warming up. It's almost April, so I feel like it's about to be that time where travel is
It's
gonna
I mean
happen.
here it's 57 here and it looks like it's gonna reach like 60s by the end of the week. So we might be getting into like the warmer like weather. But then again, this would be the second time we get into like a warmer weather. That's just weather here in the Midwest. Like you might get warm and then back to cold and then back to warm. It's no, like you mentioned, it's unpredictable weather.
Yeah, it's always unpredictable. And we hope that everyone, wherever you are in the world, because I see new faces there in Team Live Chat, we hope that you're all okay out there, staying safe. If you're tuning in with us late, because I know in the Philippines, for our friends in the Philippines right now, it's 12:05 a.m., midnight. For us over here, it's p.m. And I know for EJ over there, it's 11:05 p.m. For J Tobes, I don't know if I pronounced your name right. I hope I did. I don't know where you're tuning in with us from, but hello po. Nagtatagalog siya. So nice of you to stay up with us if you're tuning in from the Philippines. Hello also to Zina Saison, who's also tuning in with us, and our Christian Rhoda, who's tuning in with us as well. And Dan Corral, tuning in from Distrito ng Quezon City. I don't know how to pronounce the locale, so I will say the
I
district.
think that's Sabarte.
Okay.
Zabarte.
Thanks, EJ. Thanks, EJ. Yeah, for all those who are there listening live today, we hope that you can share your insights, your thoughts with us on this topic because it's always a nice topic to talk about. I think understanding, being understood. It kind of reminds me of empathy a little bit, right, EJ?
Mhm.
I don't know what are your thoughts on this topic before we really dive into it. What does it mean for you to be
I love
understood?
that you brought up like empathy because like that's a it's a core of understanding someone is understanding how they feel because I feel like it gives you a view on like how they might think or react to certain things. But I
Hmm.
love that you brought up like empathy because like for me at least it's a core part of like understanding someone is
Yeah,
being
it's
able
definitely
to
part of it,
empathize.
right?
Yeah.
Definitely part of it, but we'll revisit that throughout our discussion for today. It'll be a little bit longer. We don't have our normal chat line wants to know, but we want to spend some time talking about this topic, kind of exploring the different corners of it. Not just identifying, I guess, how to understand others, ways that we might misunderstand others, but later on we'll also revisit how we can better understand others and the ways that we can make more efforts in our lives to be able to do that. So
Mm.
the first question that I really have, because we might feel or understand or we might realize what it's like to be understood, but what is it like to not be understood? Like what are some things that you think others misunderstand about you, EJ, or things that they get wrong about you, regardless if they could be a stranger, they could be, acquaintance, maybe even your friends. Sometimes your friends can misunderstand stuff about you. What are some things that others get wrong about you? But clarify what perspective we're speaking from.
Okay, so a little bit because you did mention strangers, so I feel like I have to define my definition of like strangers because when you say strangers, people might think someone you pass by on the street, like you don't interact with them, like that might like that's a stranger definitely, but like for
Mm,
me, it's still like stranger is still attached. Like if I'm just being introduced to someone by my friend, because I consider them a stranger because of two things. I only know their name and that they're friends with my friends. I don't know
fair,
anything about them. Like apart
fair.
from that, nothing. I don't know anything else. So I still consider them a stranger, and I feel like one way that they might misunderstand or they might not understand about me is they might think that I'm like shy or uh like I might like I don't talk too much, which is kind of it's different once you I know once you get to know me. And I've had several like or not even several, it's just every time that I'm get more comfortable with someone and like it's like my uh like like my less guarded side starts to show. Like I
Right.
always get the comment of I didn't know you can talk so much. Like I always hear that from them. Like I didn't realize you I know you talk a lot. And like for me it's like yeah, like once you get to know me, like I know I'm less guarded about how I am around because that's how I am with if I'm just meeting someone and I don't know I don't know yet what they're comfortable with. They might not
Right.
be okay if I come out like if I come out the gates like hey hello what's up like
Like
what's
so
your name.
strong, right? Because
Yeah,
sometimes
like
people,
strong. If
yeah.
I've come out strong, I'm
Mhm.
like it might like push them back. I'll be like, oh, you know. So
Could
I,
be overwhelming for some people, right?
mm,
Sometimes, like, some people might think of that, like, their reaction, you might think, oh, they don't like me, but maybe they're just
mm,
overwhelmed, right? That's another
mm.
way of possibly
Like I
misunderstanding.
know that's how I would be
Yeah.
if I'm just meeting someone new. So like I try to do like the same where I'm more careful with with how I talk to them, like how I am. It always depends on how they're. If they're also like more like more comfortable, they joke around and things is like, oh well, they're they're a little bit more okay. But if I'm more talkative as well. But as a general rule, uh, like I try to be what's formal's not the word. I forgot the word I know I use. Formal's not the word. It's I try to be more careful with how I know with how I with how I talk to them as a general rule, which might lead someone to think that I'm I'm like shy. I don't talk a lot. you know.
I feel like a lot of it is also, I remember I believe I heard this from Ata Des. Or Ata Des has sent us from promoting plugging Faith and Melody. Okay, Ata Des. They're the same time as us on Monday to Thursday. I remember her saying recently something about how sometimes it's not that we're necessarily shy, it's that we don't have that confidence yet. So I feel like
Mm,
what I'm hearing from you is that you don't have the confidence yet to be you know, like joking with someone that you just met, because like what you said, you don't know what stuff they're
mhm,
okay with, you don't know
mm,
if your humor is the same necessarily, because sometimes you might want to make a joke and then it falls flat, you're like, oh,
yeah.
never
Like
mind.
you joke around with them, and then like they take it like seriously, and you're like, oh no,
Yeah.
wait, I'm just joking.
Yeah,
Like I was
exactly.
joking.
Exactly. There's one person that I can think of that's like that. Shout out to Kuya Rani, or I call him Tito Rani Bayuga. He's definitely like that. His humor is always, he just says things so seriously, and I'm like, are you for real though? like I
I
don't
know I
know.
can like
Sometimes you
relate
don't
to it
know
for me.
whether to believe it. So that's a great point. Sometimes you kind of have to wait a little bit, right, to be able
Mm.
to, before you start
Once you
reaching
get to
that.
know their
Yeah.
like them more personally, like from what you can see, like what they're
Mhm.
okay with. So yeah, like you said, something that people might misunderstand about me, and that's I know that might be one thing, because I'm more careful with someone I just met, so they might think,
So
oh,
you've been kind of
uh,
labeled as a shy person because
yeah,
you're usually
like
quiet.
yeah, like I said earlier, but I always hear people tell me, I didn't know you talk a lot, or I didn't know you can talk so much. Like it's something that they didn't expect because of how they initially meet me.
Pleasantly surprised, right? Probably pleasantly surprised.
Mhm.
Speaking of talking, I just want to greet some others who are there in Team Live Chat. Hello to Brother Nate. He's tuning in with us, saying good morning. Greetings to everyone there in South Central States. Hello also to Cafe Sales, who's tuning in from local ng Luzon Avenue Central District. So if you're just tuning in with us, we're talking about to be understood by others in general. What we're talking about right now specifically is when we moments we feel misunderstood, or possibly we might misunderstand others. So the example that EJ just gave is like when you're first meeting a person, sometimes you have the tendency to be shy because you don't have the confidence yet to maybe joke around with the person. I mean, some others do, but it just kind of varies, right? I feel like
Mhm.
for me, uh the impression I feel like the first impression that people take on with me depends on the scenario that I'm meeting them in. So if it's at like a really hype event and I can be loud, and it's like, what, like one example that I can cite is probably like Unity games. If we're at Unity games and that's the first time you're meeting me, you're gonna be seeing me as the one like hyping up the crowd or like running around and just screaming when I'm like supporting my players like full on. That's
I'm
me.
sorry, I'm laughing because when you mentioned it, it made me think of like this one instance where I like I was recording like some B-roll, just some footage, and when I was reviewing them, I could hear you cheering in the background, just yelling, "Let's go!" I was like, I recognize that voice.
Yeah, that's definitely, if you go to any of the Unity Games events that we have in the future in the Midwest, or if we have any interdistrict activities, I'm definitely that person when it comes to sports, because I go super mode for cheerleading. When it comes to like rooting for my teams, that's totally me. But if you see me in a completely different situation, like let's say I'm in a teaching mode, I feel like I can come off very serious. So I feel like your first impression of me may vary depending on when you meet me. Because I know Ata Des, again, shout out to Ata Des, her reaction to first meeting me, she's like, Tony's very quiet. And I'm like, I'm not though. It just depends on the situation. And I feel like that's one thing that we kind of I guess don't take into account, because when we first meet a person, we don't consider when we're meeting them. Like, are we meeting them through work? Is it like a work meeting that we're first meeting them? So of course, in a work environment, you kind
Yeah,
of have that expectation of being professional, but that's just one dimension of a person. That's not the full person, right? Like it's not the
yeah. Like
whole
when
like
you
whole of
like
who
when
they are.
you're let's say you first start working somewhere, everyone like you're very like serious. Like you're
Mhm.
very maybe like I remember I was like so nervous. I just like in my mind, it's like professionalism, professionalism.
Yeah.
Like whenever I talked to a coworker, I was like professionalism. But like 3 months in, like I was just joking around like with my coworkers, and like I'm more friendly the way it's said. Yeah, it
Yeah.
depends on like the context of you. I know you meet them as well. Actually, I saw Kuya Nathan's answer, and he said that everyone who doesn't know me says their initial impression is that I'm intimidating or scary. I don't realize I'm giving off that vibe. That's the
I love
initial
this.
reaction they get.
Can we talk about this? Because there's something that I just want to mention. Like when you're first meeting a person, just because they have a certain look on their face that does not reflect their personality, okay? Like sometimes you could see someone on the bus after a really long day of work and maybe they're
Mhm,
just totally exhausted and they just had that deadpan face, like they look like
mhm,
they're angry at you, but it's really not. Like try not to take it personally because sometimes people are just tired, right? And I've been guilty of that because sometimes when I'm with my friends, right, we might be meeting up after a long day and they just have
mhm.
this really intense face and I'll just kind of look at them and I'll be like, are you mad at me? And like, what? And but they're just in the zone, they were just in their own zone that whole time, so that's like
They're deep
another,
in thought.
yeah, they're deep in thought and they're just like, this day, right? They're just kind of
Mhm,
reflecting on their day because it was so exhausting and they were so tired. And that's like another way sometimes where we can even misunderstand our friends because we think that the emotions that they're feeling is something what we've done, but not necessarily because they've gone through a whole day. You don't know all the things that have happened to them within that time span of that day. And then you
mhm.
think that
This-
because you're with them in that moment, you're blaming yourself. Like, no. And I
That's
just
why I feel bad for like when someone has like their resting face, their relaxed face is like it looks serious because people usually assume they're serious because their resting face is it's like it's not necessarily a frown, but it's it's like we said, it's deadpan, it's serious look on their face, and then when they get to talking, you're like, oh. Yeah, like I thought you'd be serious. I
I
thought
feel
you'd be
like that
going to
way with
sleep.
you sometimes, right? We've had that conversation where I've talked to you because I would ask you like, "Hey, are you okay?" And you're like, "Yeah, I'm fine." But like a minute before, your face was just kind of like, like it's
Yeah.
like very sad. I'm like,
It's
"You
like
good?"
it's me like when I'm deep in thought. It's just like
Yeah.
it's not like it looks sad, but it's more like it's empty expression because I'm my mind's off somewhere. So the facial expression is just it's empty.
Yeah, so I wonder if that's what it is, brother Nate. I wonder if people are catching you on days where you're just in a really, maybe you're thinking about what you're gonna prepare for your awesome dinner and you're really intense thought, and they think that you're just
I gotta say this for yeah, okay, and Nate. Like I gotta share this story back in high school. This was before I got my glasses, so I would squint like a lot
oh no.
because I had bad eyesight, especially when I'm eating. Because I'm like really close to the food and I'm still like squinting. One of my friends like told me, it's like, why are you always angry when you're eating? I'm like, angry? It's like you're always frowning at your food. I was like, I'm not frowning. I'm just squinting. I'm not angry at my food. I just can't see it. So yeah. No, it's
How long were you without glasses before?
I didn't admit that I needed glasses. I think until like my second year in high school.
Okay, like I think I need glasses. So that whole time they just thought you were angry all the time.
Yeah, like when I'm looking at the board, when I'm writing on my notebook, when I'm eating, like I'm not angry. I'm like I just struggle to see.
Yeah, man.
I'm just
It's
blind.
sometimes you think you know, but you don't always know the whole story.
Mhm.
There's more to it a lot of the time sometimes because
Mhm.
we put a lot of what I noticed, which there is some credit, right? There is some credit to first impressions.
Mhm.
Typically, when we hear about first impressions, you think about, yeah, you want to make a good first impression, you want to put your best foot forward, but that's not everything, right? Like that's not everything we kind of match our bases on, because sometimes with a first impression, your impression could be wrong, right? We might have this assumption, we might have this idea of this person because of the way that we perceive them in a certain circumstance, a certain situation, and then we just kind of stick to that, and that's the idea that we hold on to. But then we find out later on down the line, oh, that wasn't the case, or oh, that wasn't what I thought it was, right?
Mhm.
So kind of, you know, thinking in terms of that, have you ever experienced a situation where um, you kind of wish somebody had understood you more because you kind of gave off that vibe that maybe they weren't vibing with you, or it was like, no, that's not what I meant, or like there was some kind of misunderstanding, whether through communication, depending on whoever it was with, classmate, friend, family.
I mean, it in terms of like when yeah, actually when you mentioned that, and I think I shared this story before. It made me think of like that teacher in elementary. This is like fifth grade, fifth or sixth grade, if I'm not mistaken,
Mhm.
where people or like the other kids were so afraid of being assigned to like her class, because that's how kind of like we did afternoon classes. They divide the classroom because there's like 32 or 30 students in a classroom, and they'll divide it by 15 students, and each semester you kind of get like different teachers from like for like home economics. And this is like she was a teacher in like the gardening class, and nobody wanted to be assigned in their class because everyone's like, oh, she's like really strict, she yells at students, you know. Like nobody wanted to be assigned to her class, and I was so afraid when I got assigned to her class. I was like I got that like that feeling like in my stomach, you know, like that nervous feeling in your stomach, like I don't want to do this. As I was walking to like the classroom, I was like I don't want to do this. Like I'm so nervous. But the more that we attended like her class, the more I got to know like that teacher. What I realized is that it's not that she would just yell at anyone. It's she's definitely strict, but she respects students who take the class seriously. Like if
Mhm.
you're, you know, if you listen in class, you participate in class, right? You follow instructions like in class, like she will hardly raise her voice at you if you're a good student. You know? And like I felt bad that my initial reaction to her was fear. You know, and it made me think now I wouldn't want someone to think of me that way. Yeah, because I know now that I'm in like uh leadership role, you know, like I'm CWS teacher. I don't want kids to think that I'm like a strict like teacher like that. So now I understand it. Like I understand it more. But even at the time, I kind of felt bad because I was I I didn't want people to think of me as like you know, as like the in elementary, I didn't want people to think of me as like the weird kid, or to think of me as always like he's always serious, uh, like I was doing the same thing to no, to this teacher, so I kind of felt bad at them, and I wouldn't want to be misunderstood in in that way. And I mean, in a way, it kind of opened my eyes into like being open to I don't know uh to not judging based on just what I hear about someone, especially not even just what I hear about someone, even with like my first impression of them,
Impression, yeah.
because first impression isn't always the it's in the name, it's the first
Yes,
the first impression.
exactly. I'm glad that you brought that example up, EJ, because you mentioned a very common problem that I've noticed as well when it comes to, sometimes maybe through word of mouth. in situations like that. Maybe people don't do it intentionally, or it's just how conversations happen. That's real life, right? There are people are who are like that, where they like to talk, and they start to create this idea about a person, but you know that's just one person's perception of that person, right? Like actually getting to experience them yourself, and seeing like, oh, okay, like they're not as scary as so
Yeah.
and so painted them out to be. They're actually, like what you said, they were
That
respectful and
teacher was strict but fair. Strict but
yeah,
fair. So
exactly. So all of these are different things, different aspects of ways that we ourselves could be misunderstood, right? So it could be through miscommunication. I feel like that's probably a big factor, right? First impressions, what we've talked about, the way a person might look in that first impression because of their face, or, or whatever the instance may be. These are ways that we can be misunderstood by people, because these are just singular meetings. These are just like instances, like it's just a blip, right? It's not really getting to know the whole person. So, what are the things that we can do to actually understand people more, to fully get to know people? Well, this is more in the how can we understand each other better? What are the things that we can do to better understand those who are around us? And I feel like one of the best things that we can do to kind of get ourselves in that mindset is maybe recalling a moment when we ourselves experience someone trying to get to know us better, and really making the effort to be like, oh, this person really wants to get to know me. Did you have an experience like that for you, EJ?
hmm. Actually, yeah. Some like and I gotta I gotta give a shout out to to the Kadiwa there in Kadiwa Binhi there
Youth
in
groups.
Sterling. So you guys made that effort to to get to know me better, and I attribute like me being more sociable now to to that because I remember I remember at first I would sit at like the far corner of like the table during like socializings, and you guys would always like call me over, like sit here sit here next to us, like why are you sitting so far away, like sit here next to us. And like that sort of like interaction made me like it made me feel that someone was actually like making an effort to I don't know to know about me. I remember actually like uh like our first arrival like with where, and this is not just Australia, it's in other locales as well that we've been there would always be Kadeo or Bidni who would always like ask us about ourselves, ask me about my hobbies, ask me about what like what shows I watch, what I'm interested in. And it's always a nice feeling to have someone do that for you, especially if you're new to I know to an area. You're kind of like new to like this group, right? To have like at least that one person to be like even if let's say that those are questions that are like let's say they're what's that small talk small talk
Yeah.
questions. It's still an effort. It's, like at the end of the day, it's still an effort to get to know you better, to even just to make you feel comfortable around them, right?
Hmm.
And like for me, those are like that's something that I also try doing. I also try to do for others as
I think about food. Like, I feel like one thing that what we like, at least for the youth members here in Sterling Heights, one thing that what we like to do is we like, especially now that the pandemic has died down, being able to go out is something that we've always liked doing, especially when there have been new brethren that have arrived in our local congregation, to really get to know them better is just being able to take them out for bubble tea, or going to one of the coffee cafe places. We love exploring cafe places. I'm not a foodie out of our group, but I'll go with them just to see what they like, just to see what they enjoy. And like what you said, that simple effort to just do things or ask questions to show that you're interested in getting to know them better. That's already, that first step is already huge. Just being able to give them that opportunity to open up and be like, oh, so you like this kind of stuff. And then you can kind of find your connections there, right? Because it's kind of how you
Mhm.
build connections with others, is being able to find those lines where you can relate to one another, right?
You're like setting the foundations, right? Like starting small, before you know, because like you can't just like, imagine if you just come up to someone and you're like, "What are your thoughts on like like what are your
Yeah.
thoughts on this particular subject, like in high school or like not in high school, like in college?" Like it's a deep end question immediately, like it's no, like you start off small first with those things, right?
Yeah, and even if, for me personally, even if I don't particularly like let's say you bring up a subject that I don't really care for, like, oh, I don't care for math, but
Mm,
I like to ask questions what you like about it, right? Like, what do you like? What interests you
mm,
about it? Because
mm,
sometimes I feel that, at least in what I've observed in some others, when they don't find that connection through mutual likes, or like through mutual common interests, that's when the conversation dies down. But just
mm,
because you don't like something doesn't mean you can't be interested in why the other person likes it, right? So I'll give an example. I use this example all the time. I'm in a group of friends that love K drama. They love K drama. And I get it, okay? Like, I totally get why they love it, because I've asked them about it. I'm like, why do you love it? Because I'm not the type of person that can get attached to series like so easily. Like, I'm
mm,
very particular sometimes. Not that I don't think K drama is it's good. Okay, there are good ones out there. I'm gonna say it, but I'm just not as avid of a fan as they are.
mm,
Now, the reason why we can still connect about it is because I ask them these questions. I will ask them, why do you like this show? What about it do you? What aspect about it do you like? Why is there something about the character that you like? And they'll give me answers like, oh, I really like the character development, and the soundtrack is really awesome. I think you would like the soundtrack because they know I like music, right? So
mhm,
it's in those moments where you start to ask questions, and then you can kind of slowly build, like what you said, that foundation of, okay, so this is what I know this person looks for in these kinds of things. This is what I know is important to them, right? You kind of figure out those little things about people, just through having those conversations of asking, well, why do you like that, or why is that your thing, or why do you prefer, even if they like a food that I don't like I don't like cilantro, but why do you like cilantro? Like,
mm.
it's stuff like that where we can kind of make more strides towards getting to know why people do the things that they
Like
do.
you're not completely like just like closing off the conversation, like oh
Yes.
like with like you're interested in K-drama, I'm not, okay, not like there's nothing we can like
Or
we
say, oh, I
can,
don't like that. And
yeah.
then,
Yeah.
right, the conversation does, then you don't really get to build a connection that way, right? That's
Mm,
one of the ways that I've had to work on that, because I didn't start out that way. I feel like when I was younger, I it feels kind of hard to relate to someone when you also don't like that thing, because you don't know what to talk about. But when you
mm,
can make it about the other person and be like, why do you like that? Or why is that important to you? Then it shows that you actually care what they think, right? That you
mm,
value what there might be on their mind. Why it's, again, why is it important to them? And I also
mm,
want to bring up something that Brother Nate put in Team Live Chat, because he said, for people I know, if they do something that I interpret as offensive against me, I tend to lean on assuming it wasn't their intention.
mm,
It's the glass half full mentality when trying to read people. So I
mm,
want to break this down a little bit, because there are a couple elements that I like what you mentioned, Brother Nate, because assuming that it wasn't their intention, because we don't always know people's intentions when they do stuff, right? There are things sometimes where, like what we mentioned earlier, when people have jokes, some people have sense of humor that may be different than ours, that may be different than ours, right? And they may not mean to offend us, but sometimes because they don't know us yet, they don't know where our boundaries are at. They might do something not with the intent to hurt us, but
Mm.
we might have end up getting offended. So being able to recognize that is so great, Brother Nate. I'm glad that you mentioned that because it's not assuming ill intent with others. Okay, like we're not putting on the table, other obvious acts of ill intent, right? That with violence and everything. But when it comes to certain kinds of conversations where it's just regular conversation, right? Somebody might make a passing comment that you might not hear all the time, or it could even be the manner in which they speak to you maybe is a little more intense than you're used to, and you're
Mm.
like, oh, you might receive that as a certain way, but being able to step back and realizing maybe that's just how they grew up, right? Maybe that's just how they learn to talk, like with their family. Maybe that's how they talk with their family, or maybe that's how they talk with their friends. Not assuming ill intent in other people or making those snap judgments, right? Because you don't know where those habits develop from. You don't know the mindset growing up, what their life was like, right? Because there's
Mm.
so many facets to a person for them to be able to arrive to who they are today, the experiences that they've gone through, the way that they grew up with their family, to be able to consider all those things, it's very hard to do and process in a singular meeting, right? To be
Mm.
able to write off someone as, oh, this person is rude, or oh, this person is like, they might have been rude in that split second, but that might necessarily be all of who they are, right?
Mm. And it might not even be like for them, like what Quinn Nate mentions, like it might not even be their intention, right? Like for them, it's like like for them there was nothing wrong with what they said, and like even if it's even if it's for us, like say it is, we did feel like offended at that split second, like you said, like we can't make that snap judgment because we don't know still what like what they're like, right? Like their personality. We don't like, so like you said, like for me, it's just being introduced to. If I'm just being introduced to someone, they're still a stranger to me. Like I just don't know anything about them yet. Yeah, and I can't make that decision right away now. Oh, like I can't get along with this person because of this one thing they said. 'Cause,
No, because sometimes people just make honest mistakes, like with their comments, right? And
mm,
when you, like, let's say for us, right, there are times where we've had conversations, and maybe I have said something, or you have said something,
mm,
and it was just completely misinterpreted differently than what we intended it to be, right? Sometimes
mm,
that happens even in friendships. Like one person can interpret it as something completely different, and you're just like, oh, I didn't mean it that way. Oh, but that's how I received it, right?
yeah.
But being able to get to that understanding is being able to ask those questions, like, did you mean this when you said this? Right? Did you mean that you hate me when you said that? Right? Like, I mean,
Mm,
like, it's kind of, it feels kind of awkward to do that sometimes, but being able to achieve that kind of clarity is what can really help us better understand people, because sometimes people do things with the intention to help, but
mm,
maybe the way that they're doing it, it doesn't feel helpful to you.
yeah.
So being able to ask them, right, just like, are you trying to help me right now because it feels aggressive for me, or are you trying to help me right now because this doesn't feel like it's helping me?
Mm,
You get, like, I feel like we've had moments like that, right, where even as friends, there are times where I feel like I'm trying to help you, but you don't feel like you're being helped, right?
it's not even that, like I don't feel like I'm being like helped. It's just that I'm like it in my mind. It's like it's not helping. Like it's not helping.
Feel the same.
I don't know. Yeah. Oh well.
Kind
Oh,
of,
actually,
right?
Canada didn't mention it.
Yeah,
It's hard to explain it. like like the attempt is recognized, but
Yes,
it's yeah, that's what I meant. Like the attempt
got
is
it. Okay.
recognized, but it's no, it's like, well, that's not helping.
Yeah. Yeah, I like that you clarified that. The attempt is recognized to help, right? But
Mm,
like I love that you're trying to help, but this is not
mm,
helping me at the moment. Like the best visual that I can give is like when the boat is sinking and then you're trying to get rid of the water in the boat, but the water is still going through the boat because there's a hole in the boat. Like you're trying to get rid of the water, but you're not
mhm,
patching up the hole. That's like, yeah, that's like the best way that I can think of. Like, I love that you're trying to help, but this, right? So, and it
mm,
can happen at different levels. Like, I know we've talked about first impressions and initial things with people, but this can happen even with our loved ones, even with people who are closest to us, people
mm.
that we work with, right?
Even
So,
more so, I would say, because like we
mhm,
interact with them more, right? With our friends more, we interact with friends more, we interact with family even more, right? Like it's has a bigger chance of like happening with
yeah,
with friends or family. Yeah, because we I know we do interact with them more.
yes. I also like, I see Ka Melvi is commenting there in Team Live Chat. She said, whether you're a new person or vice versa, you can't go wrong with smile and honest and sincere gestures to feel welcome and be welcomed. Self awareness, yes. Self regulation and adaptability also helps. And then
Mm-hmm.
she added, just like when we have our Bible missions, when we're inviting different people, first time
Mm-hmm.
we're meeting people, we always want others to feel welcome. We always want to them to feel that warmth, and the best way to do that is just smiling. Like smiling is such an easy way to help someone feel just like, oh, I see you, like, oh, I'm happy you're here, right? To kind of communicate that. And she said how we say things matter, the tone, the gestures, and the choice of words, right? So also know your audience in that way.
Mm-hmm.
um but this is my question to you, EJ, because I see the time, we're kind of winding down a little bit here. What's something you wish more people understood about others? So we've been kind of talking about application in terms of what we can do to understand, others a little bit more, but like in the things that you've noticed and the things that you've kind of observed. Because again, we're just speaking, we're not experts here. We're just having
Mm-hmm. Yeah.
conversations that matter. We're just speaking on our own experiences. What's something you wish more people in general would try to understand about others?
It's that we really don't know. That's we really don't know someone. Even if it's, let's say, even if it's our best friend, like I would say, even my brother, I don't understand everything about my brother because there's there's things that he doesn't share with me. There's things that he doesn't share with even my parents. Like there are things that are only between them and God. And even for me, like there are things that are only between me and God that my friends, my family don't know about. Because it's like imagine, like uh, the what they say, like the tip of the iceberg. It's basically like that, like what we think we know about someone is just the tip of the iceberg. Like how they process emotions, how they process like information, how they process like maybe the news that they hear from you, the things that they learn about. Like it's so different from how we do it, and trying to apply our logic into that might lead to misunderstanding. It's like you can't apply that same logic to them because their process is different than yours. So
Yeah,
so trying to like with what I think Kuya Nina was the one who mentioned it, like you like there's a way that we'll interpret their, like when we'll interpret their actions, but it's different from how they interpret that. And they would know how they how their intention for that certain action or their sense, the certain thing that they said. But I, because my logic is like different, it might not translate in the way that they intended it to be. And that's something that I try to tell myself when when those instances do happen where you were talking about earlier, those misunderstandings happen, those instances happen, is that their logic, how they deal with or how they process information, how they deal with things, it's vastly different from how I how I do it. So like and you always say this before, like benefit of the doubt. You always give them the benefit of the doubt, right? Like their intention is is good. Their intention is for the better, right? And it's even if it's just for if it's just for your own peace of mind at that moment. You give them that benefit of the doubt because again, like for me, the way I try to do it is like I try to tell myself now, it's that their process is different than mine. So like trying to make sense of it with my own process might not like it like it might not work out. Right? It might not equate to how I would deal with things, how I would say things. It might not equate to that. So it's something that I also wish people understand, like when they're dealing with me, is that my process is different from theirs. So like how I how I deal with how I deal with things, how I do things, it might be different from how they process, how they do it, and it's something that I wish people would understand about me, and something that I try to do to understand about others as well.
I love that insight, EJ, because I feel that I've been guilty of that, even in our friendship, but just in general, where you can't impose the way that your perception on
Mm-hmm.
other people, the way that you see things when it comes to certain things. Of course, our faith is one thing, right? That is the thing that unifies us in the way that we have our behavior, the way that we have our actions. But to Brother Nate's point earlier on, he said everyone has a story that has shaped them.
Mm-hmm.
And everybody is at different points in their life when it comes to what they're experiencing, the trials that they're facing, what they are encountering, what they have encountered. And there are things that all of us learn and unlearn, right? Like
Mm-hmm.
being able to recognize those things that everybody has different things that they were given to handle, to deal with. And what he put there in addition is it's important to help each other, more important to help each other out than to criticize and judge.
Mm-hmm.
So, in terms of when we think of understanding others better, I think of like what we mentioned earlier on in the show, empathy,
Mm-hmm.
patience, and compassion, right? I'm not saying that it's easy, okay? Because understanding takes a certain level of strength and willingness to do it, right? It's not something that's automatic. This is not something that's going to be like, I can understand you. I'm 100% all the way, no, get where you're coming from. That's not realistic. That doesn't happen. It takes work. It takes work to get there sometimes, to be able to see where someone is coming from, whether that's through time, whether that's through experiences. It's hard work to be able to understand other people. But the reason why we do it is because of the point that he pointed it, the point that he pointed out there in his comment, Brother Nate, is we help each other out that way. That's one way of showing love to one another, when we can exercise that understanding, giving people opportunities, giving them chances, right? Recognizing that we aren't perfect, that sometimes people just need that opportunity to change. If they don't change, God takes care of those people, right? But, for us being able to help one another out, encourage one another, be that person that, that can be patient with them,
Mm-hmm.
and seeing how we can help, right? And there might be some that are watching, when it comes to being understood. Because I feel like a good opposite word for this is maybe feeling isolated or you feel alone, right?
Mm.
Sometimes, especially with the younger ones, we kind of feel that way maybe when we're growing up, when we're in high school, when we're in middle school, when we're in college. We might not have found the people that understand us, or we might not have found the people that we can relate to in our school.
Yeah.
If you ever feel that way, I like what you mentioned earlier, EJ, God knows. God knows us.
Mhm.
So before we strive to be understood by anyone else, we should always strive to be understood by God first. That's why if there's one thing that I wish more people understood in general, not just about others, is yes, that everyone has a story, but make sure that you take the time for God to understand you by having those conversations with God,
Mm.
by being able to tell him the stuff that bothers you, all of your feelings that you're going through. Tell him if you feel lonely, tell him if you feel like you're struggling, because no one is going to understand you better than God. No one.
It's he knows, diba? He knows what bothers you, but it's different if you're like when you're approaching.
Yes. We have to make that effort, right?
Mm.
Just like any other relationship, we have to make that effort to bring it to him and show him that, we want him to understand us. Like, God, I'm really struggling with this. This
Mm.
is painful for me. This is something that's weighing so heavy on me. And being able to talk to him about it. Because at the end of the day, no one is going to know all of the things that you're going through 100%. Your parents won't know all of the things every moment, that because there may be things that you face in school, that difficult moments, bullying happens, that's
Mhm.
something that we can talk about in the future as well. Being able to bring it to God and talk to him about it, he should be the person that understands us first. So before seeking to be understood by others, like your peers, sometimes you might feel like your parents don't understand you. God will understand you. And when you have that conversation with him, he can pave the way for understanding to help with the other people who are also in your life as well. So I guess for me, like, that would, in terms of how we handle ourselves when we feel like we aren't understood or we feel like others don't understand us, make sure God understands you first. And the only way that we can do that is if we are faithful to him, right? And as Christians, the way that we stay faithful to God is by doing the things that he expects us to do. Doesn't matter how old you are, doesn't matter what you're going through. If you want God to always be on your right hand, to be that on your beck and call, to be there to listen to you, you have to do the things that he expects you to do. You have to be faithful. So for those who are listening, um, it's nice to be understood by your friends, by your family, by those who are around you, but priority is always that God understands us first. Not that he doesn't already, he sees everything, but have those conversations so that he can be able to help you handle whatever it is that you're facing so that you don't feel alone. Because as long as we're faithful to God, we will never be alone. Right, EJ? We always have God. I'm very sentimental.
I can
Just
tell when you get
yeah,
that certain tone in your voice. I can tell.
yeah, I'm very sentimental because yeah, it's real stuff. Like especially during the pandemic, I can't imagine how many people felt isolated, how many people felt lonely. And as Christians, being able to have God there, like I know even for those who I have friends now who live, across um the state, they've already moved out because they've graduated, they're away from their parents, and it's hard. I can recognize and see how hard it is to be on your own, but when you feel like nobody gets what you're going through, and nobody can really fully get what you're going through, it's important that God does. But you have to make, like what you said, you have to make it's different for him to be able to see it, and then for you to make the effort for him to know, to to hear it from you.
With it. Now, you know that this is you know that this is bothering me, but you know, I'm no, like you you have I think you worded it before as like you have that conversation with him.
Yeah.
Nah,
You should be
he
the
knows.
first one.
Mhm. He knows, but it's no, it's different when you're like approaching him with it. Nah, you're asking him for help.
Yes. And I tell that to all of my friends before they talk to me about anything because I know that they reach out to me, they want to feel understood by someone, they want to feel seen, they want to feel heard. The first thing that I always tell them, did you pray about it? EJ, you've experienced this,
I
right?
know. I know. I think I've heard. I've or not really heard. I've read that line
Yeah,
from
you've read that
from
line
the
so many
people.
times,
Yeah,
and sometimes
so
they'll
many.
get upset at me because they just want to have a conversation, but
Mm,
I never want to be like before God in that way. Like you
mm,
cannot talk to me unless you talk to God first.
mm,
He should be first. He should be the first one that you seek to be understood by, and then the others can come. And then of course, your parents, the ones who are listening, the younger ones, your parents. You when you're younger, you think that your parents are like, oh, you get frustrated with your parents, but
they don't get me, especially in teenage years. Like they don't understand what I'm going through.
your,
you
your
know.
parents are man, my mom is such a rock, is such a pillar for me now and like so much more now in my adult life. So take advantage of it more so when you are younger. Like have them be that person that you you go to, your go-to people. Yeah, this conversation makes me really sentimental. There are comments also in Teen Live Chat. I don't want to miss out on those comments. Kamelvi also commented. Um, we also need to consider the language and culture barrier. Yes,
Mm,
100% to better understand and be understood. But what's so great about our faith and church, the love of brotherhood supersedes all of this. That's it. That's the show. And she wrapped it up really nicely. Yeah, that's what's great about the brotherhood in the Church of Christ and as Christians, I feel like wherever I go in the world, someone will understand me. Doesn't matter what congregation I'm in, someone will understand me. There are choir members wherever I go that will understand the struggles that I go through. Or as organists practicing for organ. Yeah, there's always going to be someone out there who will understand you, and you pray for those things too. Pray to God for the people that will have the patience and the compassion and the empathy to understand you, and He'll place those people there. He'll use those instruments. So the young ones out there, you are never alone. Okay, Jake, and I see you. Thank you for this conversation. You are not alone. Okay, there are always going to be people who understand you, and when there aren't, when you feel like there are moments that aren't, God will. Yeah, we can't make everybody understand us, but God will always understand us. So, any final thoughts or takeaways before we close out the conversation, EJ?
I don't know if there's anything I can really add to the conversation that hasn't already been said. But I do hope na like I want just want to reiterate that point that you mentioned that you're never alone. But even if you think like when you're approaching like you say you're approaching God and you like in your mind you're like I don't even understand fully why this is bothering me. Approach him for clarity because trust me, he understands it better than you do.
Yes.
Sometimes, like not even sometimes, like most of like all the time, he knows he knows the conclusion before we even know the beginning. He already he understands it better than we do. So even if you say like you're like I don't even know what I'll approach God with approach him for clarity. Because more than yourself, he understands it. But yes, that's it.
God will always understand us. And for us, on our part, the action that all of us can take is try to understand others a little bit better. It's hard. I'm not saying it's easy, I'm not up here to say that it's something that's a switch. It's not a switch. It is a constant stride, just like everything else, just like all other changes that we try to do. It's always a constant stride to give people benefit of the doubt, to understand others, to see where they're coming from, to be able to perceive their point of views, right?
Yes.
The thing that stays core, that stays unchanging, and our principles is our faith, right? But we can still do our best to strive to understand where people are coming from, and then find a way to make the conversations that bring us to a better understanding, right?
Mhm.
So thank you to everyone who's tuned in with us there in Team Live Chat. We appreciate all of your comments. Thank you. Thank you for today. And before we go, those who are watching, if you enjoyed today's broadcast and if you benefited from today's broadcast, feel free to give a like over there on our link, on our solo link. And please share this with someone that you think will benefit. Everybody, I feel like, wants to be understood to some degree. So we hope that this conversation has been important to you through conversations that matter. So we hope to see you all again, same time next week. This has been INC Radio Chatline, where we have conversations that matter. Go out there, have more conversations that matter with all of your loved ones. We'll see you. Bye, everyone.
See you next week.